Alice Louise Reynolds Women in Scholarship Lecture is a memorial to one of BYU's most outstanding female scholars. Professor Alice Louise Reynolds was the first woman to teach college-level literature classes at Brigham Young Academy, and when it became BYU at the dawn of the 20th century, she was the first woman to become a full professor. The current Harold B. Lee Library can trace its beginnings to a committee on library development and cultivation, which Professor Reynolds served on, first as member and then for 19 years as chair. As a devoted teacher of comparative literature, she dedicated her efforts over many years to fulfill the dream of a large and comprehensive university library at BYU. For example, she was instrumental in raising funds to purchase all 1,200 volumes of Provost Judge J.W.N. Whitecotton's large and diverse personal library, which was the nucleus around which the Harold B. Lee Library has grown. At her death in 1938, the library had expanded to 100,000 volumes, which were the seed of our present 4.3 million volumes in the library today. This library stands as a perpetual memorial to her vision and dedication. To honor this remarkable scholar, teacher, and friend of the library, the Alice Louise Reynolds Women in Scholarship Lecture was established, recognizing the contributions of outstanding female scholars at BYU. We have designated room 3420 in the library as the Alice Louise Reynolds Conference Room, in which hang framed posters of the Women in Scholarship Lectures since 2004, as well as Professor Reynolds' portrait. It is through the generosity of the now defunct Alice Louise Reynolds clubs and the current Friends of the Library that an endowment for this lectureship is made possible today. Following Professor Dyches' address today, we will be pleased to have some closing remarks from the University Librarian and Director of the Harold B. Lee Library, Dr. Jolene Butler, and then we will go into our Q&A session. Now to today's featured speaker. Professor Dyches is one of us. She received a BS in Special Elementary and Elementary Education at BYU in 1986, an MS in Early Childhood Education at Utah State in 1990, and a doctorate in education from Illinois State University in 1995. Her research emphasis is on children with severe disabilities, including those with diabetes or autism, reading comprehension difficulties, depression, and homelessness, as well as research into how children with those and other disabilities are portrayed in children and juvenile literature. The author of over 50 articles, chapters, and presentations, Professor Dyches is a well-respected and compassionate, thoughtful investigator. She currently is Associate Professor and Graduate Coordinator of Special Education in the Department of Counseling Psychology and Special Education in the David O. McKay School of Education. Not only is she a thoughtful and thorough scholar, she is a well-respected and humane teacher, just the sort of professor Alice Louise Reynolds hoped BYU would have. It is a great pleasure to welcome today 2010 Alice Louise Reynolds Women in Scholarship Lecturer, Professor Tina Dyches.
Thank you. Can you hear me this way? I'm feeling like we have feedback. It's just my feedback? Okay. I'm glad to be here with you today to talk about viewing disability through a gospel lens. And I would like to thank my colleagues, Suzanne Roper from the School of Family Life and Barbara Mandlico from the College of Education, Elaine Marshall, who is formerly from the College of Education, of Nursing, and Donna Freeborn from the College of Nursing also. We work as a multidisciplinary team, the Family Adaptation to Disability and Chronic Conditions Research Team, and we've been working together, well, the team's been together for much longer than I've been here, and so I'm grateful for their work and for all of the research assistants that have worked with us throughout the years, as well as the many families that we've worked with, both the parents and children with special needs, as well as their siblings. I'd also like to thank the committee, the Harold B. Lee Library Committee, for establishing this Alice Louise Reynolds lecture. And I'd like to thank Alice Louise Reynolds because she's the reason that we've got a really great library here. And she was an amazing woman. The more that I read about her, the more I was amazed of the things that she did for BYU's library. And I frequent the library for my research as well as my personal reasons, and I am very appreciative of what she has done as being one of the top 10 BYU professors of all time. What I'd like to do today is give you a little bit of a historical background of worldviews of disability and then contrast them with modern Christian views of disability. One of the 100 most influential persons in the world from Time Magazine, 2005, Peter Singer, said this: "Killing a disabled infant is not morally equivalent to killing a person. Very often, it is not wrong at all." This is in 1999. He also said, "There are many beings who are sentient and capable of experiencing pleasure and pain, but are not rational and self-conscious, and so not persons. I shall refer to these beings as conscious being. Many non-human animals almost certainly fall into this category, so must newborn infants and some intellectually disabled humans." Yet, in the Doctrine and Covenants, we learned that, remember, the worth of souls is great in the sight of God. So when you think of disabilities, what do you think of? At the top of your mind, what comes to your mind? Maybe something obvious like Down syndrome or cerebral palsy or blindness or deafness. But do you see this list of the multitude of types of conditions that we can have? We are beings that are prone to human weakness. And when we label those weaknesses, we create a dichotomy between us, who we are, and them. They are so different when we label. We are good at labeling now. We've got a diagnostic and statistical manual that's this thick that shows how many conditions we really could have. But when we label, it creates some kind of artificial barrier. And so in our field, we're called tabs, many of us. And I've created a new term, is a TAM. So a tab, I'm sorry, that's a little dark, is a temporarily able-bodied person. And a TAM is a temporarily able-minded person. What we know from modern revelation is that Boyd K. Packer said, if we live long enough, will end up having some kind of a physical impairment. And this is true. We come into the world not knowing much, not able to do much, and we leave the world with our faculties a bit impaired, our physical abilities a bit impaired. So we leave it in a more innocent state, like we came. So it really is part of the human existence. In 1 Corinthians 12, 14 through 22, it states, "For the body is not one member, but many. If the foot shall say, because I am not the hand, I am not of the body, is it therefore not of the body? And if the ear shall say, because I am not the eye, I am not of the body, is it therefore not of the body? But if the whole body were an eye, where were the hearing? If the whole were hearing, where were the smelling? But now hath God set the members, every one of them, into the body as it hath pleased him. And if they were all not one member, where were the body? But now they are many members, yet but one body. And the eye cannot say unto the hand, I have no need of thee, nor again the head to the feet, I have no need of you. Nay, much more, those members of the body which seem to be more feeble are necessary. And those members of the body we think to be less honorable, upon those we bestow more abundant honor, and our uncomely parts have more abundant comeliness. For our comely parts have no need, but God hath tempered the body together, having given more abundant honor to the part which lacked, that there should be no schism in the body, but that the members should be the same, should care for one another. And whether one member suffer, all the members suffer with it. Or one member be honored, all the members rejoice with it. Now ye are the body of Christ, and members in particular. James Faust said, "Where in all the world is the physically or mentally perfect man or woman? Is life not worth living unless it is free of handicaps?" When we look at the diversity of humanity, we really realize that it is us. We all have something in common. We are more alike than we are different. And this is how it's been throughout the ages. Beginning with Adam and Eve, they lived in a perfect state. My belief is they probably had no disabilities. Their bodies were in a perfect state at that time until the fall. And then we learn in the Old Testament of many types of disabilities, those with a blemish or blindness or broken body parts or congenital malformations, dwarfism, spinal deformities, people who were lame. We see a lot of instances in the Old Testament. And we know that there was compassion upon those with disabilities. Yet, in the Levitical priesthood, those who had deformities were not allowed to approach the altar or go beyond the veil because they were deformed, which is different than the Greek view of disability, or of ability, of the perfect body, the Greek body being the one that is to be emulated. And that time, this is actually from about 590 BC, this statue of a young Greek man, perfect in form. And as our sculptures got more intricate, they became even more perfect. They say this one, his ears are back a little too far, but they perfected perfection in their sculptures. And that's what we started viewing in terms of ability and disability. You know of the history probably of Spartans leaving their children out for exposure. So if the child had a deformity of some sort at birth, they would leave it out to die. Oedipus is a perfect example. He had pierced ankles and was left out to be exposed, left to die, but that did not happen with him. So we see that being disabled is a bad thing. It's something that we want to get rid of at that period of time. However, in the New Testament, we find a different view of disability. We see deafness, blindness, mutism, infirmities, leprosy, paralysis, withered hands, and I'm supposed to say skin. And we find that Jesus had compassion upon those with disabilities. He healed the blind and the lame and those with leprosy. He performed, of the 30 different miracles he performed, 21 of those were for people with disabilities. Here's Jesus. The previous picture was of Peter and John healing a man who was lame, and this is of Jesus healing a man from his blindness. One of my favorite pictures is this Carl Bloch, which we'll be able to see relatively soon at the Museum of Art, of Christ healing the man at Bethesda who had been at the pool of Siloam for quite some time, could not get to the pool quickly enough because the pool had moving of the waters, and it's suspected that maybe there was some tremor in the earth that would make the water move, and he had no one to bring him to the water. The first one to touch the water was the one that was going to be healed, and he had no one to move him, and you could tell from this depiction that he appeared to be living there and had no one to bring him into the pool to be healed. But Jesus was the one who did not need those waters because he was the living water, and he was able to heal him of his infirmity because of his faith. So there's often a question, is it a punishment for sin? Some in developing countries still believe that it is a punishment for sin. But we know through the New Testament and other revelatory works that it is not a punishment of sin that children or people have disabilities. It is that the glory of God may be made manifest through those with special needs, and we have a work to do to serve one another for all of our various conditions. This was taken recently in 2002 of some men with leprosy in Jerusalem, which was believed, you have to shun those with leprosy. My colleague Gordon Gibb knows about this because he's worked quite a bit with those families of people who have leprosy. We know now that you can prevent leprosy, and it's not because of the sins of the parents. And through modern technology and modern medicine, we are curing a lot of these ancient conditions. In this slide, you'll see the Christ up at the top, and at the bottom, if you'll look a little closer, looks like this boy may be having a seizure or may be lame of some sort, may have some kind of condition. I find this very interesting in that some of those are looking at the child and forgetting that Christ is the one who really heals. He may not heal us physically all the time, but he can heal our hearts, he can heal our attitudes and our emotions, and provide the ability for us to cope with the myriad of difficulties that we will encounter in life. Back in the 1880s, close to the time that Alice Louise Reynolds was here, I think she started 1890s or so, it's very rare to see individuals with disabilities in family pictures back in the 1800s. I was so thrilled when I found this picture of two loving siblings, two girls. One probably has hydrocephaly, and nowadays we put shunts in their heads and we drain the excess water from their brains, and that didn't happen back then. And so life expectancy was much shorter until modern medicine has been saving a lot of people who normally would not have existed for a period of time. So because we have modern medicine, we also have the diagnostic classifications, and the eugenic movement was really big around the turn of the century. Now, in Joseph Smith, 1844, with his King Follett address at this funeral, he said this: "All the minds and spirits that God ever sent into the world are susceptible of enlargement." That's all the minds. It's not just those bright minds that can come to BYU. Okay? It's all the minds, regardless of how they're born, where they're born. Everyone is susceptible of enlargement. That was a very different view in the 1800s. It was revolutionary to think that. Not much was being done for those at that period of time. They had started some schools for students who were blind or deaf toward in the 1800s. But turn of the century, when we started doing more IQ testing to look at who's capable of serving in the military, who do we want in our country and who do we not want, became a really difficult time for us in America as well as in Europe, because what really happened in Europe with the Nazi regime is those with disabilities who were born infants with disabilities were placed in institutions, and because of racial cleansing and wanting a pure race, those who were born with disabilities, and even for a period of time up to 3 years old if they had a disability, could be eliminated in these institutions. They were actually called killing centers, without parents even realizing that their child would be exterminated. So it started there, but the German people, primarily the Protestants, and actually the Catholics as well, were upset about what was happening to their children without their knowledge. They would get a letter saying, "Your child unexpectedly passed away. We will send you their remains, your cremated remains, if you wish, but we can't guarantee that they will get to you." So it started there, and then they started killing older people with disabilities. This one in German, I don't read German, but in the English it says, it shows this child probably has microcephaly, and the caption reads, "Because God cannot want the sick and ailing to reproduce." And that's what the eugenics movement was about, is the Kallikak family, the Carrie Buck case, all was about not letting the feeble-minded, the infirm, have more of the same, to create a race that would not be on par with others. So these men obviously had disabilities. So before they started killing those Jews who didn't have disabilities, they were killing people with different types of disabilities. Just because you're deaf was a reason to be killed, okay? Because they did not fit in the society. This is very different from what Joseph Fielding Smith. All spirits, while in the pre-existence, were perfect in form, having all their faculties and mental powers unimpaired. Deformities in body and mind are physical. Because we believe in a three-part plan, that we had a pre-existence, we're here on earth now, and we have a post-existence. Really, what we are dealing with now, all of our multitude of problems, is really just temporary. The Lord did not put people on the earth with a vibrant orchestra of personalities, only to value the piccolos of the world. Every instrument is precious and adds to the complex beauty of the symphony. All of Heavenly Father's children are different in some degree, yet each has his own beautiful sound that can add depth and richness to the whole. That's Joseph Wirthlin. Dallin Oaks has said, "Healing blessings come in many ways, each suited to our individual needs, as known to him who loves us best. Sometimes a healing cures our illness or lifts our burden, but sometimes we are healed by being given strength or understanding or patience to bear the burdens placed upon us." Russell Nelson has said, "Life has great value for all, including those born with disabilities. To deny life to an individual because of a possible handicap is a very serious matter. Policy consistent with that logic would dictate that those already living with such deficiencies should likewise be terminated. One more step in that tragic train of thought would lead to the conclusion that those who are either infirm or inconvenient should be eliminated. Such irreverence for life would be totally unthinkable." James Faust, "The resolution promised by the atonement and resurrection continues in eternity. Physical limitations will be compromised, and the body to the soul, yea, and every limb and joint shall be restored to its body. Yea, even a hair of the head shall not be lost, but all things shall be restored to their proper and perfect frame." By the way, Aristotle did note that baldness was a very bad thing to have. It was like a disability, according to Aristotle. Okay. And you know how humanly frail I am? This is not my right PowerPoint either. So I'm going to skip down to where I need to be. Interesting for us in LDS theology is that we believe children who have disabilities that impair their mental faculties are saved in the celestial kingdom because they are not accountable before the law. Because if they've not reached the cognitive age of 8, they are in no need of having baptism. And so with many of the parents that I've talked to and we've talked to in our research, they say, my child has it made. We just can't wait to be with them. As a matter of fact, yesterday I was working with a family, and the father just came to me and said, we don't know why our daughter was born like this. We didn't do drugs. We didn't do alcohol. We weren't bad in any way. And she looks like a normal child, but she can't speak. Her sensibilities are not that great. She's not very attuned. She can't understand very well. He says, but we love her so much, and she has brought our family so close together in ways that other families just can't understand. He says, kids like these are like gold, and gold is very hard to find. Another father said to me last night, we were at a field trip with my students and these families came and helped us out. He said to me, we long for the day when we come back, when we are in heaven together, and we will take turns listening to Trey tell us all of the stories that he has to tell. Another boy who was in a wheelchair and physically and mentally involved and not capable of speaking. So because of our theology, we have great hope for the future, that this life is just temporary. Some of our research that we've done, I'll just highlight one of the studies that we conducted with LDS families, showed that they have various perspectives of raising a child with disabilities. It's a little bit small, but basically the core theme was, this is a spiritual experience. It's not just a physical experience, it's spiritual, and that they have a different perspective, which encompasses getting spiritual and religious meaning. What does it mean to have a child with a disability? Theologically, what does it mean? What does it mean for their family? What does it mean for their children and the grandchildren? Some parents said, my mom said that if I just prayed hard enough, that my child would be healed, and that didn't happen. Others in the ward would give very helpful hints of what they thought would be helpful, but it placed guilt upon the family. So they found some ambivalence with church members saying, oh, this is what you should do, or this is why. I've got a friend who said, well, you know, people blame me because I drank a little bit in high school, and they said that was my sin, and that's why I've got the son that I've got. Okay? We know that that's not the case. Of course, there is fetal alcohol syndrome. There are some things that absolutely are caused by parents, but most disabilities are not caused by parents. The parents have said it's a blessing, and the child has a purpose, and we have an eternal perspective, and she's got it made, and we can't wait, and we're working to make sure that we can be there in the next existence with her. They use their faith to transform, so they've learned, even through the initial periods of grief, because frankly, not many people, I know of one person who's wanted to have a child with a disability, wanted to bear a child with disability. I'm sure there are others, but most people want a healthy boy or girl, 10 toes, 10 fingers, full mental faculties, able to do the great things that you've been able to do, live the kind of life that you've had. Very few say, wow, I'd really like to have a child with Down syndrome so I can, see lots of doctors and get respite care and therapies and work with special educators and their principals and all those therapists that we need to work with. Very few people want to have that extra burden, if you will. So these parents have gone through this transformation of, okay, this is what's happened to our family, and it's changing us. It's switching the way we're viewing our family, and we have to do things differently. And they've learned to accept, the families in our sample had learned to accept it, and they've moved forward and they're able to transform and find the spiritual influences in their daily life. Even when one child who's unable to speak can tell when there's contention in the family, and she screams. Even when there's a PG movie on in the other room and she's watching a Disney movie, a good Disney movie, not one of the nowadays ones, but a good Disney movie, a G-rated movie, and then in the other room there's something that's not good, she'll be screaming because she can feel that something good is not going on in the other room. And so there's a spiritual connection that the families feel with these children. Some spiritual manifestations parents talked about were dreams or impressions that, yes, this child was meant to be with their family, and they are there to bless them. The child is there to bless the family, and the family is there to bless the child as well. They built and expanded their personal faith. It was more helpful for families when the father and mother shared same religious practices as well as spiritual beliefs. So having that unity was very helpful in raising that child. But then again, they had misguided advice from church members, and they felt, many of them, that they would not fit into church? You know, what if my child screams during sacrament meeting? The old ladies always turn around and look at him. How are we going to get a primary teacher? We're going to burn out a primary teacher if we have a one-on-one. Maybe it's easier just to stay home. As a matter of fact, some research says 50% of those with disabilities don't attend religious services because it's too much of a burden to get there, whether the building is inaccessible or because they don't feel that they are a member of the congregation. And then having family dissonance in religious practices also affects the way that families strengthen or have weaknesses in raising a child. We know that people with disabilities nowadays, because of the technology and the education that we have great possibilities when they can become computer programmers, nonverbal guys with autism, high-functioning people with Asperger's syndrome are doing wonderful things. People with intellectual disabilities are going to college nowadays and learning trades and learning occupations and contributing to society. We're so thrilled to see this new view based upon what Christ has told us, that we are here to serve one another and to value each other as a child of God. And that's what we're seeing in this century. This mother shares her story. She said, "I think the biggest way my faith has helped me through the difficulties of raising a child with disabilities is just the perspective of I have of her divine nature and identity. I am LDS and have a strong testimony of the plan of salvation. When Caroline suffered a severe brain injury at birth, the neonatologist gave us the bad news and suggested we may decide to pull the plug. I was perhaps being overly sensitive, but it really seemed as though he was implying," oh, there goes my cursor. Sorry about that her life wasn't worth living, and that the tremendous difficulties that lay ahead of us would far surpass any benefits of keeping her with us. But as I shared our news with my friends who are not LDS, I got to tell them that I know that Caroline has an eternal life, and that this mortal life is just a brief middle part of that life. I know she was a fully formed spirit in the premortal life, and that after this life she will receive a perfect body and be able to walk and talk with us. I know that she is the beloved spirit daughter of our Heavenly Father, and that He will therefore help us through all the hard times, even when we don't often understand what's going on. Over the past 7.5 years, I'm sure He has helped us much more than we ever recognize, and we're thrilled to have this wonderful, pure person in our family. I'm grateful for the support of our faculty team and the library and those families that we've worked with, and the McKay School of Education that supports our research working with families, primarily LDS families, because we do a lot of our work in Utah County. A lot of those families are helping us out, but we've also worked with other families, and we're working with some families who are Hispanic and helping them learn to help their children with behavior problems and autism more. And so I'm grateful for all of those that we've worked with throughout the years, and I thank you for being here today.
The Director of the Library, Dr. Jolene Butler.
Thank you so much, Tina. Dr. Dyches, I should say. What a privilege to hear from you. And clearly, this is a highly relevant topic to me. When I contacted Dr. Dyches and invited her to share this lecture, I knew of her research specialties, and then as she informed me of her topic, I thought, that is the perfect dimension for this presentation. To be able to understand disability issues from the gospel perspective is the only way to be able to face a life of joy and total fulfillment. Thank you for sharing your deep understanding with us. Thank you for your life work, for focusing on this vital area of research and interest. Thank you for being an example of a woman who is deeply involved in important scholarship. We honor you.